We're live. Good afternoon, everyone. Now we're approaching the end of what has been a fascinating day, and I should probably, or in interest of full disclosure, I should say that I rode a Lime scooter on the way here, and somehow in the process my glasses fell off. So if any of the questions during the fireside chat sound a bit odd, it's because I may not be reading the questions correctly. But I think thanks to my Surface device, I've just made everything really big, so I may have to go like this. In any event, we've talked a lot about technology today and a lot about digital transformation. And as you've heard a couple times, it's not about technology of the future, right? It's about technology that exists today. And so thanks to our clever marketing people in the back, future now. We've brought this auspicious panel together today because we believe that we need to be thoughtful about the impact of artificial intelligence and related social issues. So there's certain values that artificial intelligence needs to respect. And I think a few of our speakers have spoken about these today. But just to list them again: fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, accountability, and transparency. I'm not the first person to say that ethical issues are of great importance to artificial intelligence, and that is because we are fundamentally, empowering computers to make decisions that previously only human beings made, right? So we have to be aware and conscious of the decisions that are being made. So I would suggest to our panelists as we start here that technology needs to be subject to the rule of law and regulation. And I think as Pip opened with in the intro to the day this morning, technology is not only about what we can do, but what we should do, and in some cases, what we shouldn't do. So I'll take just a few minutes now to introduce our amazing panelists, and then we'll jump into some questions. I think I'm doing okay so far. I'll start with Rachel Kelly. Rachel is the Director of Ethical AI and former Deputy Chair of NZ Tech. If you're not familiar, Ethical AI helps companies develop and maintain digital trust through pragmatic data ethics frameworks, codes of digital conduct, and governance while preparing for artificial intelligence. She recently joined Nereid, an exascale storage company which uses GPU acceleration to reimagine digital trust. And I think there's something to do with blockchain in that, right? Tom Daemen, to Rachel's right, is Associate General Counsel for Microsoft Australia and New Zealand. He's based in Sydney, Australia. Vanessa Sorenson on the end, I think most of you probably know, is the Enterprise Commercial Lead for Microsoft New Zealand, based in Auckland. And immediately to my right is Russell Craig. If you don't know Russell, you should. He's our National Technology Officer for Microsoft New Zealand. He is based in Wellington. So without further ado, we'll jump right in. And the first question goes to you, Tom. So get ready. The New Zealand government has been really focused on the future of work, and there have been a lot of discussions around that topic in Wellington and around the country. So as AI permeates every industry, I'd love to get your perspective on how the global workforce will be impacted.
Look, it's a great question, and certainly one of the hot issues of our time. AI is going to create a whole host of incredibly exciting and interesting new jobs, but make no mistake, it will also eliminate some others. And more than anything, however, AI is going to change jobs. It will require all of us to learn new skills, to be a little more nimble, a little more adaptable, and just be cognizant of the fact that we have to be constantly learning and more adaptable in this exciting new era.
So do you think, when the discussion of AI comes up, there's often a lot of fear expressed, certainly a lot of hype. In the context of workforce displacement, we need to be ready for the future, but is it Is it more hype than anything else, do you think?
It's probably the number one public policy question we get around the world. Everyone knows great change is afoot when you talk about the future of work in AI, but people are also struggling with what you do. And from a Microsoft perspective, we always encourage everyone to try to break it down into two ways: how we should respond individually, and then how we should respond collectively as a society. At the individual level, we think it's incredibly important that everyone embrace this notion of lifelong learning. Gone is the era when you go to school once and you're done, you're out of uni, and you go on with life. That has to end. Now, at the collective level, from a societal perspective, we need to bring that ethos of lifelong learning into our schools, into our unis, into our technical institutions, to make sure that absolutely everyone gets a fair go in this incredibly competitive and agile new era.
Okay. Rachel, this is a question I'm throwing at you on the spot, so you haven't had time to prepare. I'm sorry.
So am I supposed to be preparing for these questions?
Yeah.
You did a really good job.
But based on Tom is talking about, lifelong learning and expected changes. I mean, if someone today comes to you, a high school student, for example, who's thinking about what they're going to do in university, what do you advise them to do?
Mm-hmm. So this has been asked a number of times with multiple panels, and as you mentioned, it comes up very frequently. So what is the idealistic or the idealism around this is start doing what you love. Right? So if you start following your passions and things that you're clearly very good at or enjoy at school, there's a likelihood that you will make this new world, which is going to be augmented, work for you because you bring passion and joy to a job or a role or whatever activity that a computer may simply not. So there's a lot of discussion around that idealistic point of view, I can't even say it, about do what you love and the rest will follow. Now, that's not necessarily the best practical advice. I think there has to be a degree of review of augmentation. So if you love to do something, how can you see it being effectively augmented with AI or some type of algorithmic solution or effect, and then smartly follow that passion, knowing that you probably will need to understand augmentation to that moving forward. But I think follow what you love and be pragmatic about the future of augmentation to that love is probably very wise.
Yeah. Russell, any thoughts on that?
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, actually. I think we've, in the recent past, gone through a phase where it seemed as though looking at the future and the way technology was unfolding, if you didn't go and learn how to code, then what future do you have in this digitised economy? And I think we're actually now in a world where, yes, for many people, you're going to need those new and certainly core skills. But equally, I think you're right. Follow your passion. Ask how technology might augment where you want to go or influence where you want to go. And think about the new skills that humans will need to make sure that we're able to use this new technology in ways that are beneficial. So I think, we have a view, certainly looking forward, something that's going to be really important in our organisations is people who are able to exercise really good judgment around technology. Ethical judgments and what have you. So there's certainly plenty of scope for people in the future to be developing those sorts of skills that we're going to need around artificial intelligence and similar technologies. Yeah.
What is even interesting, though, to add to that point is there's an inverse relationship between humans and machines and their ability to execute something. So what humans find very challenging, computers tend to find quite easy because it's usually related to ones and zeros and some highly complex kind of calculation or consideration. Whereas what we find relatively easy, which is empathy and visual cues and understanding a cat hiding in a bush, computers actually find really hard. So it's, as I say, bringing a little bit of passion and joy and spirit, I suppose, into the digital journey to help enable a future of work that everybody can be really proud of.
Yeah. And I'd add also, be optimistic. We were talking about this briefly before. If you go back 200 years, what was the fate of most children as they went into the workforce? You were down pit or into the fields. working in the agricultural workforce or horrible industrialised jobs. Now that's behind us for so many people around the world. So I think we need to, and technology has been part of that journey we've been on, so I think we need to be, optimistic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd love to add something, actually what I picked up today around Minecraft, and actually how we are in fact teaching the next generation to code, to be the scientist, to be the innovator and the creator. And something that's so near and dear to Microsoft's heart is that next generation of talent. Not only because for many of us we're going to struggle with trying to recruit phenomenal smart people that interface with data and AI, a lot of these kids don't think they're smart enough or that they can't do these things. And so what I've loved about the conference today for myself with my own children is it's not about me saying how about follow STEM and do more science and tech. They're already doing it. They're creating, they're coding. So I think for me as a mother, I'm going to change that narrative, and certainly more and more as we engage with Educational Institute, actually it's more about embracing what they're already doing today and the coexistence of the empathy and the how with what greatness we're not great at that can bring all this together.
Yeah, no, thanks guys. Tom, just one last quick question on the future of work and changing jobs. Both Tom and I are lawyers at Microsoft, and over the last year, the legal department at Microsoft has rolled out a bot called Zila, and I thought it might just be interesting to share how that's been embraced by some employees and some lawyers at Microsoft, but maybe not all.
Yeah, look, it's I think a terrific example of this interplay right now between the types of roles that we may all have in a services capacity and how technology can augment those roles. And like all large companies, we have a certain amount of legal work that's a bit commoditized. There are generic trademark reviews and a whole host of things that are very amenable to bot-like if-then solutions. If you ask how to do an NDA, this is how you can get an NDA done. It's not stuff that people in the legal department are terribly thrilled by doing, to put it mildly. And quite frankly, from a customer perspective, and she is our customer, actually, if you think about it, we are the lawyers supporting her.
Love that.
She can now go to the bot and get that NDA tool faster, easier, and allow people like us to spend more time on higher value add services. It does mean that our AI bot needs to meet her needs. It needs to get the right NDA or get the right thing and do it in the most effective way. But it is, it's a perfect example of how AI can augment the work that we are doing. It's not displacing us. We didn't fire people because of Zila. It allowed our people to do higher value work and allowed our internal clients or customers to get a better response and more rapid, high quality work product.
Yeah. And actually, I think we should be really excited about that potential. We need that. Certainly if you look at the workforce projections in New Zealand, what have we got? We've got an ageing workforce and a concern, well, who's going to do all the jobs that are needed to be done in society? So how do you solve that problem? Partly through technology, I think, going into the future. We can't get people to turn out to pick apples anymore. Well, robots should pick apples, let's face it. Humans have got far more potential than picking apples. How are we going to deal with the shrinking health workforce? Through more use of technology to augment the humans that are working in the health system. And I think it's important that when we think about the future of work, tie those two things together.
Yeah, okay. Vanessa, I'll direct the next question at you initially. And in addition to sort of the future of work and changing workforce, the other issue that comes up in the context of artificial intelligence and its impact on society is bias, right? I mean, so I guess the question is, how do we protect against bias in artificial intelligence, whether that's, gender, racial, economic, et cetera?
Yeah, look, great question. And I'll just do a really, really quick story, actually, of my first impact of kind of interfacing with data and AI. I was up in Redmond with some of my colleagues and in the Microsoft Enterprise Briefing Centre, which is a phenomenal space that we can go and work with our customers around visualising what can be. And when you go and get a coffee, they've got these really big screens, and you can all stand there with your colleagues, and it works out your age, your gender, And I kind of stood up there and I was a 25-year-old woman and I was like, yes! But how wrong is that? And what it sort of taught me as a 47-year-old white woman is data in, data out. And so, you know, I think for all of this, we've all got to be conscious, even the way we hire people today. You know, if we're all looking for the same white male or white female, that's what the data, that's what we're going to get. So, you know, I think as businesses, and I talk a lot with what used to be called HR, but is now your cultural development people, around what are we doing about this? Because it's more about the how we're going for that versus actually is artificial intelligence going to kind of create even more of a bias that's already actually there today. So, you know, that was just one kind of brilliant example of an algorithm that had been working. Apparently it's going to learn as it goes on. I then frowned and became a 50-year-old woman. So, you know, it was actually more about the how I was interacting with this. But it's something we all need to be conscious of. And LinkedIn's another great example of an incredible tool that we all use every day to seek the new talent that's coming through. But if we're looking for the same thing, no matter what tools are there, we're going to get the same output.
What's really interesting with that is, you know, bias is not inherently bad, right? Bias is an anthropological survival mechanism, right?
Yeah.
We, as humans or any type of species that inputs information, processes, you know, countless points of information on a minute, second by second basis. And the sheer process of bias allows me to be up here right now focusing on what you're saying rather than being distracted by noises over there.
Yeah.
And that's the very function of bias, is it helps us become more efficient at communicating and doing what we actually care about. The problem comes is when we actually forget that there is bias within our behaviour and how that affects other people negatively. And so when it comes, as you said, data in, data out, if we aren't aware of the bias that's being built into the front end, then we're not necessarily aware of the bias that comes out as the insight or the predictive analytics. And so that's where it becomes a problem, is how do we actually harness a degree of bias that's actually really helpful, but often that's about getting, you know, proper snapshots of a full population to get the data points that are fair and have equal opportunity for analysis and you know, prediction, and then how do we, you know, act on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Certainly at Microsoft over the last 2, 3, 4 years, we've invested a lot in being explicit about unconscious bias, and you know, making sure that we are more mindful of the fact of unconscious bias. And I think that's the key thing, isn't it? That, as you say, bias is not inherently a bad thing, but unconscious bias built into models and algorithms is when we start to run into problems. So we need to be thoughtful and admit that bias exists, and it's always built in to these models.
The downside of technology is it's a mirror that amplifies our society's culture and humanity. So we are inherently biased. That is the nature of being human. And unfortunately, technology is simply a tool, and the tool that we're using to essentially amplify and mirror the society that exists right now. So until we address the inherent society issue around bias and reinforcement of bias because of unconscious, you know, data points or issues that are coming in, you know, the technology will simply mimic that.
As you think about the ethics of big data and bias and all of this, the other thing that pops out to me is it's one of those issues that really spans all of our organizations in the room, right? Right now, from a global public policy perspective and just general global debate, there's all this focus on the big technology companies and how we use data, and that's 100% smart. I completely understand why everybody's focused on the big tech firms. But the reality, as trite a cliche as it is that we're all big data companies these days. We're all software companies these days. I am confident that every organization in this room has massive collections of data. And so as we talk about the ethical use of big data, we at Microsoft have the incredible luxury of, you know, frankly, a huge legal team and massive resources to think about ethical principles and having review committees and all of that. But certainly one of the things that we always try to point out is that all of you have data as well. And it's really, really important that this notion of the ethics of big data data not just be limited to the 5 or 6 huge technology companies. Every organization that is processing huge amounts of data needs to be thinking not just about what are my legal compliance obligations, but what is your ethical stance? What do you stand for when it comes to big data? What ethical principles will you take? What line will you not cross? Those are not just debating points for the large technology companies. They're issues that we should all work on. Every organization, small, medium, and large, that deals with data.
So Rachel, we've been talking about, AI or a specific AI tool is only as good as the data that goes in, right? And it's all about the data. Governments are collecting more and more amounts of data. And when we all travel now, right, we fingerprint and we do eye scans and the like. I mean, how do we protect against, or protect the society in which we live against sort of big brother uses of data?
That's a really good question. So the spectrum of concern over that big brother is quite different depending on which country you speak with. So for example, the UK have been having a lot greater surveillance of their citizens than often talked about and compared to America. You don't hear the UK or as a country complain about Big Brother because they're comfortable that the data is being collected in a way that is for the greater good. What we see in places like America and the issue with the Big Brother is often sensationalized by TV, by the media, saying that people have your information, and a very aggressive capitalism society, capitalistic society. So it's this horrible tension between this culture, the cultural lens. What is acceptable to collect on the citizens? How is it acceptable to use that data to protect or conversely harm? How are they benefiting from the information that is being collected to outweigh any issue with injustice or harm again? But I actually think it comes down to the cultural lenses, or even the moral foundation code. So there's essentially 5 moral foundations, if you believe in possibly the 6th. You've got your care, your fairness, your loyalty, your authority, your liberty if you're in agreement with the final one. And I actually can't even think of the last one. Sanctity, that's right, sanctity. And each of those 6 moral foundations, it's like you've got little toggles across all 6. And everybody will have a different degree in how much they care, whether something is either more on the harm versus it's highly sanctity? The sanctity, right? So as long as all these little dials are balanced or within a culture that it's acceptable within the culture, then that culture will be happy with it. The issue happens is when you've got a culture that doesn't accept a lack of fairness versus harm, for example, and then you start getting more and more of the culture and the society actually complaining that my data is being misused, or there's an issue, or there's a privacy concern because those little toggles are kind of out of whack. And that's very much based on culture and a same moral foundation theory. It's a highly complex kind of interplay, but that's essentially what it comes down to. Is if Big Brother is an issue in one country or another, often it comes down to cultural lenses and moral foundation theory.
Yeah, I mean, Russell, you do a lot of work with government and different governments. And any other thoughts?
Well, yeah, I was going to say actually, we've got a really interesting experiment unfolding in front of us in the case of China with its social credit score, right?
Oh, yes.
So let's all watch that and see how it plays out, because there's an example of the state using a lot of information about you to affect your life path based upon how you behave. So that will be really, really interesting. I think part of the response is we need to think about how, certainly in liberal societies such as ours, we can enable citizens to have more control over the information that's collected about them, and in particular associated with them as in the form of a digital identity. And I think we're now sort of seeing the emergence of some new approaches to identity and, by extension, control of information using decentralised identity technologies built on distributed ledger, not exclusively, that will be part of the answer if governments I guess, recognise and agree with that proposition that in a liberal society, citizens should have as much control as you can afford them over the information that is collected about them. And then partly I think the answer is also to do with transparency. And Estonia gives quite a good example. So Estonia collects a lot of information about its citizens. It's shared pretty seamlessly between government agencies because they have a collect once policy embedded in the law. But any Estonian citizen is able to get an absolutely clear picture of who is using data about them for what purpose in government. So they're addressing the challenge by maximum transparency, and maybe that's part of the answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still focused on government, but slight segue, Tom. Fake news, right? It seems that artificial intelligence and bots and whatnot are being used to influence how we choose and elect our leaders. Is Microsoft doing anything about that, or what's your take on fake news?
Look, I always love the people with such good crystal balls that they can predict how everything is going to play out. There's no doubt that big data, AI, all these algorithms can and will have an impact on how we elect our leaders and how democracy works. How will it impact? Will there be greater algorithms that will give us a better sense of who people are, what they're doing, how they may vote? Might it influence whether or not people vote if the algorithm tells them this person's going to win overwhelmingly anyway? It clearly could go in a variety of different ways, and I'm certainly not going to predict exactly how it's going to play out. What I will say, however, is that these sorts of conferences, these sorts of discussions, as well as the events and conversations being driven by all sorts of governments around the world right now, are exactly what we need to do. This is the point in time when we need to start having a discussion about how we want data to influence how our democratic processes work. We shouldn't just let inertia take over. This is right now where we have to have this conversation. If you have a strong opinion on this fact, make your voices heard. Go to the conferences, convince your governments to engage in this dialogue. There are all sorts of transnational, multinational conversations, meetings, conferences, proposed regulatory regimes in this space. This is the moment in time where if you care about this issue, you can get engaged. And we strongly encourage all of you to do just that.
So, this question time has gone pretty quick. We may only have time for one more question, but I'd like to hear from each of you. I mean, we've obviously talked a lot about the potential risks, maybe the potential harm from artificial intelligence. We've also talked, today about AI for good. And so I'd love to hear from each of you about your sort of favorite AI for good story, and the potential for AI to do good in the world. Any stories either from New Zealand or elsewhere?
Yeah, look, I'd love to start. And look, I heard of one recently, an amazing partner of Microsoft's based in Wellington, who was a company that kind of got born out of more of the designer space rather than coding. And what they do is they gather all of the information around all the ACC claims that are going on. And what they do with this data is they're letting our hospitals and our care providers know of what's coming. And I think about in New Zealand of, a lot of us do say that so much of our health system is just not connected. I think for myself personally, I would love one record, no matter where I am in this pretty small country, to go with me. And that's the goal of this organisation. And, so for me, I can see so many possibilities of how we can gather that data and produce the insights to a lot of places at the moment that are just struggling at the seams about how much is coming at them. And something what I use personally as a mum for my kids is that I can see what you're doing. Now I can't, but it's, we've actually also got to, teach our children around where they're leaving their digital footprint. And what is that going to look like? And what do they want to put out there? So, for them, I think it's also an incredible world of possibilities, of so many greatness around what the data can do for them, especially around hospitals and education. I think, there's just so many. I've got so many examples, but that's one that comes to mind.
Yeah. How about you, Tom?
One very quick one on my end. I love the Maori conversation at the end of the morning session, and highlights for me a lot of AI work that we're seeing around the world right now in the preservation of historical cultures and languages in particular. There's amazing work being done in the HoloLens space to preserve very old languages, and that's certainly an initiative that the United Nations is driving as well. And hopefully we can come up with sort of a common platform where everybody can onboard a lot of these languages so that they aren't lost to the sands of time.
So good. My favourite use case really comes around the AR/VR space, so helping to improve cultural awareness and contextual analysis when people are walking down the street or visiting heritage sites or culturally loaded kind of environments. I think using AI or deep learning models to explore our culture, explore the environment, and improve the collective understanding of people's journey within that environment is a really fascinating way to use the knowledge.
Yeah, okay. Russell, the final word.
Oh, wow, I mean, you see really exciting, mind-opening sort of proposals or actual on-the-ground practices using AI almost every day. I feel really lucky. I get really exposed to it. So it's hard to pick sort of something that I'd call a favourite, but there's a couple of things that
you could do a couple,
come to mind. So I want two. So the steel fabricator that's been using computer vision to help them with health and safety on the factory floor by recognising, hey, there's a worker that's too close to a machine or what have you, and that's sort of a policy violation, so we can stage an intervention to stop something bad from happening. So that's a great example of how AI can be used to protect us when you can't afford to be ever vigilant, watching people. Another one relates to sort of pastoral sort of care of tertiary students. Turns out that you can predict whether someone's going to start to sort of fail in university and drop out by looking at attendance rates and, are you turning things in and what's happened to your grades across time. But across a large student population, how the heck do you do that? So there's been some really interesting stuff being done to use artificial intelligence to again go, hey Russell, it looks like you are conforming to a pattern that's going to lead you to fail out of school here, so we can now target an intervention and at least try and figure out what's going on, see if we can help you, keep you on track and get you through your course. So that's a great example of where, again, I think AI can be really beneficial.
Yeah. Thank you to each of you. It's a little bit short but sweet. But we want to end on time. So thank you for listening today. And as I started, ethical issues are important in the discussion of AI. And I think we need to continue the dialogue, to continue the discussion, to continue to have panels on this. Certainly we didn't reach any conclusions today, but I think it's important just in and of itself to have the conversation and really be aware of the issues and how technology can and does impact society. So I think we'll exit stage left, and then we have, I'm not sure if we're welcoming Chris or somebody to the stage to sign off for the day. So thank you, everyone.